Fantasy fanfiction. Martial arts online game. Get Wanjian to return to the clan at the beginning. Chapter 31. Sikong Jiaxing seems to have a natural offense against Examen Fushui. And Lu Zhaofeng didn't help him either. Only Chen Li was sandwiched between these two people, and he felt his head was huge. Boy, tell me, who is stronger between me and this ice lump? Sikong was limping around in the courtyard, looking at Chen Li and Examen Fushui, who was too lazy to pay attention to him. Chen Li was a little speechless, but he also said honestly, "You are better at Qinggung than him, and he is better at swordsmanship than you." This question is actually meaningless, because the rankings in the arena, especially the local rankings, already speak volumes. Sikong's stars are only in the top 70, and Examen Kuishui's list is more than 10, and sometimes even broke into the top 10. Sikong Jiaxing's lightness skill is only slightly stronger than Examen Fushui's, but Examen Fushui's other aspects, especially swordsmanship, can completely kill Sikong Jiaxing in seconds. Sikong Jiaxing was obviously very dissatisfied with this statement, but couldn't find any reason to refute it, so he hummed and said, "Lu Shaoji, when are we leaving?" Lu Zhaofeng ignored him, looked at Examen Fushui. "Brother Examen, I really can't stay in Lingnan for long, let's meet again in the future." Examen Fushui nodded. Chen Li actually really wants to stay in this villa for a while longer. Because just staying for a day and exchanging swordsmanship with Examen Fushui has benefited him a lot. This kind of benefit will not be displayed on the attribute panel, but it will be related to the breakthrough of the realm in the future. It's a pity that Examen Fushui's temper won't allow him to compete with him in swordsmanship, otherwise, the promotion will be even more terrifying. Because the sword of the sword god is a sword that kills people. There is no reason for Chen Li to stay here in a deadpan manner, after all, he does have his own things to do. Then nodded and said, "In that case, let's say goodbye." Examen Fushui's emotionless expression changed, looking at Chen Li. "You stay." As soon as this remark came out, Sikong Jiaxing looked at Chen Li strangely, and Lu Zhaofeng was also taken aback, but he was not willing to delve into the matter of his friends with that kind of temperament. People from the rivers and lakes are extremely free and easy, and true friends don't need to be pretentious. Lu Zhaofeng left the villa directly with the limping Sikong Jiaxing, leaving behind Chen Li, who was a little dazed, not knowing what happened. "This is for you." Unexpectedly, Examen Fushui threw something directly at Chen Li. It wasn't Chen Li's favorite swordsmanship, nor was it a sword weapon, let alone a martial art, but a piece of jade the size of a palm. This jade is square and upright, it looks like a piece of uncut jade, but the jade is delicate and smooth, like skin to the touch. Even if there are no other words, this is an unimaginable treasure. "This is..." Chen Li was a little dazed. Examen Fushui Uncommon explained, "If you don't want this thing, I will find someone to give it to someone else on the road. This thing is my guess, you can take it, it is a favor I owe you. In the future, when you understand what this thing is, you can come to the villa to find me, and I can teach you my sword skills. Also, don't tell anyone about this, otherwise, I will definitely kill you." Quote. After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked into Zhuangzi, not intending to continue talking nonsense to Chen Li. Chen Li is also a bit inexplicable. "You accept the mission, the mystery of the sword god peerless. Close black lens bracket. Where is all this?" Chen Li scratched his head, but still put the jade into his backpack. "As far as Examen Fushui's promise and the difficulty of this task are concerned, he deserves my attention. Examen Fushui's Wanmei Fushui swordsmanship, this swordsmanship that he comprehended by himself, the swordsmanship that has achieved the prestige of the sword god, must also be a swordsmanship of the highest level." Although he was a little puzzled, he got a quest clue of a unique swordsmanship. Compared with the previous life, it was indeed many times stronger. Chen Li showed a smile. It's just that he just walked out of this mountain villa, and when he came to the foot of the mountain, he saw Sikong Jiaxing and Lu Zhaofeng waiting by the side of the road. Neither of them asked what Chen Li and Examen Fushui had said, but Sikong Jiaxing said carelessly, "Brother Chen." Before Chen Li opened his mouth, this guy also threw something over. Chen Li quickly took it and looked down, this time it was a book. Open black lens bracket 7 star step close black lens bracket. 6 rank lightness kung fu. Footwork like light skills, which can move and dodge at high speed, the secret method of Sikong's early youth skills. At the same time, it is also the basic lightness exercise of Sikong's unique lightness exercise, star-touching steps. Close black lens bracket. Learning requirements. Body technique greater than 32, internal strength greater than 4,000 points, concentration greater than 20. Chen Li blinked, and looked at Sikong in disbelief. What does this guy mean? Brother, your level of lightness kung fu is not good enough to say that you are friends with me, Sikong Jiaxing and Lu Shaoji. When you go out in the future, it's a shame. Although this lightness kung fu is not high level, it is very suitable for beginners who have no foundation in lightness kung fu, so don't dislike it. That's it. That's it. Let's go, Lu Shaoji. After all, this guy didn't intend to listen to Chen Li's words at all, and followed Lu Zhaofeng, who smiled at Chen Li, to connect points in the forest at a speed that was unfathomable to the naked eye. Only Chen Li was left in place, looking at this light work, a little worried about being cheap and acting like a good boy. For swordsmanship, he can ignore the learning requirements and learn it directly. He can even directly comprehend such heaven-defying swordsmanship as the evil swordsmanship. But light work is not enough. Chen Li took another look at his attributes. Movement, 28, concentration, 18, internal strength, 4,500. Internal strength is enough. His many adventures and internal strength all have a strong relationship. Chen Li's previous attribute points were all on understanding. The reason is simple: understanding can speed up the proficiency of practicing martial arts. Naturally, the more the better, the sooner the better, but at this moment, Chen Li regretted it. If I knew it earlier, I would leave the upgraded attribute points. It is the right way to improve this lightness skill as soon as possible. Chen Li let out a breath slowly. It seems that the next step is to upgrade. But before that, I still have to go to Lao Dao to have a look. This guy hasn't stopped harassing his flying pigeons for a while. Fuzhou's carriage. Chen Li sat opposite Lao Dao. The plot of the Fuwei escort was at an unimaginable speed, and finally ended with Chong Tian Duxing and Feng Lai, the two well-known game guild presidents in the Dragon Kingdom, together issuing a wanted warrant for Chen Li and Lao Dao on the forum. Chen Li didn't care at all, and neither did Lao Dao, otherwise, the two wouldn't have done that kind of thing together. After being dragged by Lao Dao to ask questions in Fuzhou City for a long time, the two of them left together. As for the destination, it was Luoyang City, which Chen Li had never been to in this life. The reason is very simple: Lao Dao took Lin Zhenan's family of 3 to hide, and that Mrs. Wang asked Lao Dao to send a message to Jin Dao Wang's house. It's just a simple small task. Chen Li doesn't care where to go. Luoyang City is a famous city in the world. There are some leveling places around it, and there are even some hidden dungeons. Chen Li also wants to quickly level up to improve his attribute points, learn the 7-star steps, as soon as possible, and it's not too much difference where to level up. Luoyang City. It belongs to the border of the Ming Kingdom, and it is not too far away from the Jin Kingdom. As one of the largest cities in the world, the bustle here is indeed not comparable to others. As the martial arts family in Luoyang, the Golden Sword Wang family occupies a vast area, there is no doubt about it. Chen Li didn't bother to go to the Golden Saber Wang's family with Lao Dao. He knew from listening to it that the Golden Sword Wang's practice and learning were all sword techniques, and the background of the Golden Saber Wang's family was really something that Chen Li didn't look down upon. It's really too rubbish. If you have that spare time, why not wander around Luoyang City, where you haven't been for a long time, go to those martial arts gyms, and look for low-level swordsmanship that can be bought with money. It's just that Chen Li went around and visited several martial arts gyms in Luoyang City, but he didn't gain anything. Most of the martial arts sold in the martial arts hall for money are fist and palm techniques, and the sword technique itself is not the martial arts taught by the martial arts hall. Even if there is, it is also a secret method, which is rarely spread outside the world, and it cannot be obtained by money at all. Chen Li was a little bored, and after completely giving up this thought, he just regarded himself as a shopper. This time around, I really saw a fun place. On the side of the long street, there are many people around. Chen Li crossed the crowd and saw a small table and 2 benches in the circle at a glance. There were 2 figures sitting on the bench, and they seemed to be quite old. One looked to be in his 40s, with a weird appearance, as if his 5 sense organs were gathered together. If it wasn't for his long hair falling on his shoulders, this person would look like a freak. And the other old man has a refined temperament, either a well-educated bachelor or an official. The two of them stared at the chessboard on the small table. The black and white pieces were clearly displayed. They were obviously playing chess. Of course Chen Li knows how to play Go. Not only will it, but the attainments can be said to be quite impressive. In his last life, in reality, he had a very high understanding of Go, and he came to the rivers and lakes, in the Mizhuang, and played against the black and white sun, the old fox who was deep in the city and immersed in chess for half his life. It can be said that among all his thaumaturgy, the thaumaturgy of playing chess is the most attained nowadays. Has reached the 8th level of terror. This strength, even in reality, even if it is not considered a national player, is definitely not bad. Naturally, he could tell at a glance that the older man had been surrounded step by step, and there was no way he could recover. Shook his head. The old man saw sweat on his forehead. As expected, within 3 steps, the dragon was directly surrounded and killed. The old man sighed, and cupped his hands towards the middle-aged man in front of him. Awesome. I admit defeat. Only now did Chen Li see that there was a small flag erected behind the middle-aged man, with a few large characters written on it. A game of chess, a game of 10 coins, the winner gets 50 taels. Single quote. Good guy, no wonder you have such a big tone, this strength is indeed impressive. Chen Li was watching the excitement, but the middle-aged man suddenly looked at Chen Li, with a faint smile on his weird, even ugly face. This little brother seemed to have a suggestion just now. I wonder if the little brother is willing to play a game. Chen Li was taken aback. He had indeed seen the old man's failure just now, but even if he shook his head, it was hidden in the crowd and shook his head slightly. Others may not be able to see it even if they stared at it, let alone discovering it. This person, Chen Li shuddered in his heart, but he didn't hesitate, and showed a smile directly. Okay, then thank you for your advice, senior. The voice of this middle-aged man has some accents. It doesn't look like a person from the Central Plains. Instead, it seems to come from the north. His accent is a bit like the land of Laobei. It's a little bit different. Chen Li's level of strength and his way of playing chess have reached an unimaginable level, and he can be regarded as a generation of famous masters, but when he actually sits in front of this small bench and small wooden table, facing this weird and ugly man, there is a different feeling. The chessboard is the battlefield, and every chess piece is a sword move. After a game of chess, Chen Li is already sweating profusely. And when he looked at the chessboard again, DeLong had already been eaten up. Chen Li blinked, but didn't react for a while. The middle-aged man smiled and looked at the dazed Chen Li. As a game of chess, if you can predict the enemy's opportunity at every move. If you break the move first, and even hide many traps and murderous intentions in the move, you will be invincible. These words, he spoke clearly, but the surrounding people watching the battle seemed like no one heard it. They all looked at Chen Li's chess game. It was a pity that this was the longest game they had watched with this man with a strange face. But only Chen Li knew that he was no different from the old man who played chess just before. He finally understood that this was really meeting an expert. Chen Li hurriedly cupped his hands. Thank you for your guidance, senior. The man smiled. What kind of expert am I? I'm just a chess maker. Well, is there anyone who will try again? Chen Li really wanted to play another round, but he knew that no matter how many rounds he played, the final result would be the same. Chen Li couldn't even fathom the level of the man's chess skill in front of him. He glanced at his attribute list, and sure enough, at some point, his level of chess skills rose from the 8th level to the 9th level. But even so, facing this person, his chance of winning is definitely not more than 10%. This person, who is it? What's the matter with you, kid? Why are you so muddled? Lao Dao looked at Chen Li, who still seemed to have not recovered, and said speechlessly. How come it took such a long time to go to the Golden Sword Wang's house, and Chener seemed to have lost his soul? Does the Zhonghu martial arts game also have such weird things? Chen Li shook his head, and finally came to his senses. He has been searching his memory for who this middle-aged man is. I just thought about it for a while, but I didn't think of the origin of this person. The most likely one he could think of should be someone from the Happy faction in Legendary. Both Su Xinghe and Wu Yazi are masters of chess. But Wu Yazi is disabled, and his age is not right. Su Xinghe is even more impossible. This old guy's chess skills are not low, but his martial arts is really not high. The implication of that person just now is really too high to express. Could it be Xiaoyaozi? It's possible but not very likely. That kind of person doesn't seem to be the kind of expert who likes to hang out in the world of the world. Okay, where do we go to level up? My level is only level 12 now. I heard that there are people in the forum who are over 20 levels now. That's outrageous. Lao Dao's continued words interrupted Chen Li's thinking again. Chen Li also tried to get these out of his mind as much as possible. Now it seems meaningless to think about them. He identified a direction a little bit, and said directly, "Come with me." The place he went to was not a hidden place, because there really was no need for secrets. In front of a dense forest path outside Luoyang City. What is this? Copy. Don't you know? Chen Li looked at him like a fool. Lao Dao shrugged and cursed. This game is so real, I almost thought it was a real rivers and lakes. Once the things in the game appear, I really don't get used to it. Chen Li was speechless. This dungeon is called Green Forest Robber. It is a copy from level 16 to level 30. I chose this copy mainly because it will explode some low-level swordsmanship. Now Chen Li may not be as enthusiastic about Jushui swordsmanship and divine grade swordsmanship as he is in 100 books of low-level swordsmanship. Both of them were wearing bamboo hats, but no one could recognize them. These two were the two who were famous in the Fuzhou drama. It's just that Chen Li's footsteps were just about to head towards the entrance of the dungeon on the dense forest path. When he tilted his eyes slightly, he saw the side. The entrance to this dungeon is naturally indispensable for players. At first glance, there were close to 1,000 people, making this not-so-spacious jungle road a bit crowded. And before this dungeon, a commotion sounded. Can you see what kind of rubbish you are? It's fine if you're a girl, a big man, and what's the matter with letting others take care of you all the time? A somewhat sharp voice sounded, and a young man who looked to be in his 20s frowned at a figure with his back to Chen Li and spoke impatiently. The figure with his back turned seemed to be at a loss for a moment, but he didn't seem to say anything. But one of the people behind the young man spoke again. Okay, senior brother Yifan, what are you talking about? Let's enter the dungeon quickly. One thing to say, he has such good grades in school, I didn't expect to be so good at playing games. If I knew it, I wouldn't have brought him here. I made senior brother Yifan angry for no reason. Do you understand the gold content of the #1 student in Peking University? He is all focused on his studies, and it is a great blessing to be able to play games with our classmates. A series of words and the coquettish laughter of several female players in the team made the figure take half a step back. There were also players around who couldn't see it, and wanted to say something more, but the young man who was the first to speak gave him a sword. His swordsmanship is so sharp that he can indeed be regarded as a master at this stage. At this time, another young man who looked obviously older opened his mouth and said in the team, "Brother Chen, listen to the senior, go and ask for a teacher, your vertical and horizontal swordsmanship is really bad. That is a second-grade swordsmanship. Why do you have to hold on to it? If you learn advanced martial arts from a teacher, your damage strength will naturally increase. You are really useless in the dungeon now, and you are making it more difficult for us. We are going to challenge the difficulty of this dungeon, there is really no way to let an idler join." Quote. It's okay. The figure finally spoke. What kind of idler is it? It's just a piece of trash with a single brain. Brother Li, don't talk nonsense, hurry up. Originally, when Chen Li looked at that figure from the back, he just thought it was so similar. But when I heard the vertical and horizontal swordsmanship, I could finally confirm it. At this time, the figure with his back turned to him is really the same person from the previous life. The existence of this person has created a new wave of low-level martial arts study in Zhonghu. His existence even negates the system's judgment on the level of martial arts ability to a certain extent. In the year Chen Li traveled through, when Washan was discussing swords, this person even defeated Du Guchu, Lang Fanyan and other top-ranked swordsmen, and won the sword among the 9 masters. 9 Wonders in the World is not just a title among players. But after the alien was born, there were other top NPCs participating in the later Wanjian. Its gold content is even greater than that of the number 1 in the world that all players are chasing and competing for. Because this number 1 in the world is a competition among player groups, and 9 uniques is a group of top players in the entire arena who will participate. And the person in front of him, although not the first player among the 9 Ju, is the first player among the GN Ju. This person is different from all other masters. Without any advanced martial arts. Don't say it's a unique skill, he doesn't even have a middle grade top grade martial arts. As I said just now, a second rank vertical and horizontal swordsmanship. That's all. Thinking of this, Chen Li slowly stood still, and under Lao Dao's somewhat surprised gaze, he turned to the dazed figure who watched his companion leave his back and said, "Hey, that one over there, do you want to form a team and play the book together?" This sound was not very loud, but at this moment, it was extremely ear-piercing. Especially when the attention of all the players is in front of them, the two people walking towards the back are even more eye-catching. The figure whose back was always facing Chen Li and Lao Dao finally turned around and looked at Chen Li. Sure enough, what appeared in front of Chen Li's eyes was indeed a rather familiar but a little more immature face. He is not that old, maybe even a year or two younger than Chen Li's age, and his appearance can only be regarded as upper middle-aged, but there is a calm temperament between his eyebrows and eyes that does not belong to this age. Chen Li never raised his bamboo hat, but he stopped in front of this figure, clearly showing his position. The team of 10 or so players who had just turned around and was about to enter the capital stopped immediately. The young man who looked young but was the leader turned his head and looked at the two ignorant people in front of him with some unkind eyes. Guy. However, Chen Li ignored him. With his current achievements, unless it was an outrageous opportunity and personal strength like Lao Dao, he really didn't have anyone or anything to be afraid of. "Do you want to form a team to book?" Seeing that he didn't open his mouth, Chen Li asked again. He had no covetous heart for these masters from the previous life, and I have to say that he still admires the person in front of him, and it is not bad to be able to form a fate. The young figure pursed his lips, just nodded and said, "Okay." In the previous life, the Zhonghu Know-It-All's evaluation of this character was taciturn, not good at words, and some even said that he was not human, an iceberg. Player, Su Chen, level 11, joins the team. Close black lens bracket. Hey, where did this come from, such a great master? Seeing injustice on the road, he drew his sword to help. This is. Seeing that Chen Li actually formed a team with the trash he kicked out, the young man at the head of the team immediately looked even more unfriendly, and said in a strange way, "There is such a kind of person, and it is indeed the case." Chen Li didn't bother to pay attention to him, and didn't even look at him from the beginning to the end. But the people behind the young man obviously thought it was because Chen Li didn't know him. "Hey, that guy, do you know who our brother Fan is? Now the big disciple of the Snow Mountain sect. The first person. Now the great master of level 21. Lao Dao didn't care about it at all. Although he didn't know why Chen Li was willing to meddle in such common matters between players, he had to say that the appearance of these people singing together with red faces and black faces and white faces really made him cringe. Answer. Hearing the name of the chief disciple of the Snow Mountain School, Lao Dao was really taken aback, and looked at the young man in surprise through the bamboo hat. Chen Li sneered. Wait until the real senior brother is determined in the big competition of various sects, and then use this name to mess around outside. If you want to join the sect first and become a senior disciple for a few days, don't flaunt it. You guys don't feel ashamed. I'm even ashamed of the Zushin faction. He didn't bother to pay attention to these guys, and walked directly towards the door of the Green Forest dungeon. The faces of the young man in the lead and the man and woman behind him turned pale, and the obviously oldest senior looked at the three of them with a gloomy look in his eyes. He seemed to be a peacemaker here, but he was undoubtedly not a good thing. Hearing this, he sneered and said, "It seems that this friend doesn't need to worry about the matter of the Zushin faction. They are all unknown." Such a big tone. "Don't you think you are the Chen Li?" After Fuwei escort and the first kill of the only NPC before, Chen Li's it is obviously the most well-known in the world now. In particular, the two presidents of Fengxing and Chengtian also added a lot of firewood to the forum. And that strength is indeed obvious to all. Using himself to satirize himself, Chen Li only thought it was extremely funny. He and Lao Dao exchanged glances, neither of them said much, and headed towards the opening place of the robbers in the green forest. Only Su Chenchen, who never spoke again after joining the team, looked back at his original teammates with complicated eyes, and at the same time, he also had a few real classmates. Although he is indeed not that good at playing games. I don't know much about many things in the game, but in the past 10 days, the name, Chen Li, has been heard the most from these students. But now, after joining the team, the names of the two, Chen Li, in the team are not eye-catching, but there is absolutely no typo. In other words, the first player who has been mentioned by his classmates these days and has become famous in the Zhonghu is now standing in front of them, being ridiculed by them with his name. It's just that he is not a person who likes to talk nonsense, and in the end he didn't say anything more, but followed the two to the door of this green forest robbers' alley. The crowd of onlookers felt a little regretful, and turned their contemptuous gazes to the so-called Snow Mountain sect disciple. Including the trash you kicked out of the team, there are only 3 of them, and there are almost 10 of you in total. In this case, don't you directly PK. This disappointed the players who were already ready to watch a good show. It's just that this disappointment has not been eliminated. At the intersection of the dense forest path, a burst of purple ripples swayed, and the figures of the 3 disappeared on the path. This situation didn't seem very eye-catching, but it suddenly exploded. I'm going. Am I reading that right? Purple. Is this the color of the difficulty of hell? Is that person crazy? How dare you go to the difficulty of hell with a piece of trash? This dungeon of Zhonghu is really up. The higher the difficulty, not only the high level of martial arts, but also the ridiculously high intellectual combat experience. Players of the same level may not be opponents, let alone leapfrog. In front of the dungeon door that had just stopped, the young man named Yifan froze immediately, looked at the disappearing jungle path, and then sneered. How the hell can you pretend? I'm just here to see, dare to go to the dungeon of hell. I don't know how I died. Hell difficulty. As far as the current level of players is concerned, I am afraid that even some ordinary people who have raised their level to level 30 are unlikely to easily pass this level of difficulty. Because of what I said before, Zhonghu is different from all games. It is not the kind of mobs with fixed attack patterns, and in most of the dungeons, there are also humanoids with high IQ. That kind of ferocious combat experience, not to mention now, it is estimated that players have to hone for a long time, or are really talented, before they can challenge it. This is also the meaning of hell difficulty. Lao Dao is a newborn calf who is not afraid of tigers. He doesn't understand the meaning of this dungeon of hell, so he doesn't care. Chen Li really didn't care. After entering the book, he didn't seem to notice the difficulty of the choice. He just walked on the path in the green forest, looked at Su Chenchen and asked. Their virtues. Why do you want to play with them? This question caused Su Chenchen to pause for a while, but he still answered. Before my grandma died, let me make more friends and stop focusing on my studies. These words made Chen Li and Lao Dao slightly taken aback. Lao Dao immediately slapped his chest. Boy, in the future, I need to find my old knife. What the hell are those? Brothers and friends play a game and still hate other people's food. What is it? Chen Li glanced at the old knife who was carrying a lot of money. This guy may not know that this Su Chenchen, whose name it does not fit the status of this person in his previous life, should be much better than you in the future. And, Zhonghu, is really not a common game. Just as he was about to say a few words, there was already the sound of rustling footsteps. In the dense forests on both sides, crossbow arrows pierced the air, bursting forth. Chen Li seems to have expected it. There was an arc on the Qingfeng sword, and the sword light flickered, and the crossbow arrows like fine raindrops were all blocked by the block. Such handsome swordsmanship. A long whistle sounded. Then, the sound of fine footsteps came, and within a short while, all the fronts of this not-so-wide path were blocked. The person who opened the mouth for the first time has a muscular body and a bald one-eyed dragon wearing an eye patch. It can be said that it is not the slightest difference from the bandit in the impression of ordinary people. It can't be said that there is no difference, it is exactly the same. With the monster in the copy, Chen Li naturally doesn't need to talk nonsense. He has never used the evil sword technique since he mastered it. Now is definitely a good time to try it out. Do it. Chen Li's figure turned into an afterimage and moved as soon as the voice fell. Evil warding off swordsmanship. It's called exorcising evil spirits, but it's an extremely sinister and evil swordsmanship. It is different from the dazzling electric light when the Yizi electric sword came out before. There is no glaring posture in the sword of the evil sword technique, and in the cold, there is an indescribable strangeness and gloom. Between the sword shadows, there seem to be howling ghosts howling and breaking free. Under the cover of this sword technique, even if the sword energy is slightly rippling, it seems to be able to put people in the midst of forest ghosts. The most important thing is that Chen Li has the effect of returning all swords to the sect. The evil swordsmanship of the 9th rank can be regarded as the top existence among the weird swordsmanship and the unique swordsmanship. And in the state of the sword god, the power displayed far exceeds the killing power that the evil sword technique should have. Before this small road, under the difficulty of hell, there were dozens of robbers in the first wave. All of them are boss-level existences. However, among those random players outside, they may all be massacres. Before this sword shadow, there seems to be no room for resistance to fight back. In theory, this is the first time Lao Dao saw Chen Li's shot. Even with all the previous things, I have to say that Lao Dao really doesn't think that Chen Li is necessarily better than him. Only he himself knows that the master he worshipped, although he has not learned any real skills to suppress the bottom of the box, but the basic methods are beyond the imagination of ordinary players. Not to mention that Chen Li at this time didn't even join the sect at all. But at this moment, Lao Dao really understood that it was not because of the so-called luck that Chen Li said in Feige's biography that he was able to have such a famous name in the Zhonghu, and even defeated Yu Kanghai. Blood, blade, and that black ghost that seems to be everywhere, turning into a series of black ghosts that take people's lives. At this moment, Chen Li, holding a 3-foot sword in his palm, is like a deadly ghost walking in the world. Those leader robbers who stood still didn't even manage to resist. Without even seeing the shadows of the robbers in front of him clearly, there was already a sword mark on his neck. -6,798. -5,879. -7,149. Just for a moment, it can already be described as corpses everywhere. The number of blood red and the situation of corpses scattered all over the field not only made Lao Dao's eyes widen, but even Su Chen, who had always been a little bit unaware of this Zhonghu, stood there dumbfounded at this moment. This figure, who has always held a pen in his hand, looked at the sword in his hand sincerely for the first time. This game seems really interesting. Your level has been raised to level 19. Your blood value +100. Close black lens bracket. The sound of the system prompt seemed to finally bring this battle, which was clearly unequal in strength but even more unequal in the process, to an end. To be precise, this should not be a battle, but a unilateral massacre. 9th rank evil swordsmanship, in this low-level dungeon, is almost at the level of a sharp weapon. And the harvest is also extremely gratifying. Chen Li looked at a book protruding from under the corpses of these 20 people. Open black lens bracket hero swordsmanship tier 2 close black lens bracket. This kind of low-level swordsmanship is difficult to say or not, but Chen Li has the memory of his previous life. Although it is possible that those swordsmanship at the level of unique skills and magical skills do not know the process in detail, some low-level swordsmanship he still knows exactly where it fell. Young lady, Chen your swordsmanship is so ghostly. Look at the cold wind blowing through our bones. The old knife on the side couldn't help but came forward and said. Chen Li didn't explain anything, especially the existence of the evil sword manual. If he said that he learned this sword technique, what would this guy think? He couldn't explain too much about the problem. He could only raise his eyebrows provocatively and said. The previous adventure. How am I doing? Can't accept it. Sure enough, when Lao Dao heard this, he immediately dissatisfied. Hey, come and see our sword skills. He stopped talking nonsense, used his Qinggung, whose name Chen Li didn't know, and headed towards this green forest path. Chen Li laughed, and then looked at Su Chen, who had never said a word. You don't need to accommodate yourself for others, just be yourself at all times. Su Chen was taken aback for a moment, and this sword god Su Da, who had always presented a cold and indifferent image in his previous life, paused for a moment before saying, Brother Chen, is your swordsmanship very good? How high is it? Chen Li didn't hide anything and said bluntly, 9th grade. It is the highest grade under the absolute knowledge and magic swordsmanship. Su Chen asked again. As they said, the higher the level of swordsmanship, the more powerful it is. Chen Li shook his head this time. No. No matter what martial arts are, it's not the martial arts that are good, but people are good. The strongest is never martial arts, but the people who use martial arts. The world's unique skills and magical skills are indeed rare, but if they add up, they will definitely not be too few. Some people can be ranked on the top of the list with ordinary martial arts, and some people have supernatural skills in their hands, maybe they can't break through even the innate. Quote. It is not wrong for Chen Li to say this, but in fact, there is a very important condition. That is, for the vast majority of people, the level of martial arts does represent a lot of things. But for Su Chen, it's not. Chen Li is also unwilling to change the way of the first swordsman of the player in the previous life. Because he doesn't have that qualification. So all he can do is to continue to let Su Chen walk firmly on this lonely road of master. He vaguely remembered that Su Chen from the previous life said in the only interview that the vertical and horizontal swordsmanship was in his hands, not a vertical and horizontal swordsmanship, and he could even change its name at will. According to the only acquaintances of this Su Chen, this vertical and horizontal swordsmanship was later renamed by him as the 8th Desolation swordsmanship, and then it was changed to Liuhe swordsmanship. Wherever his heart moves, his sword moves. This sword technique was even included in the system's list, and there was no such thing as a grade afterwards. Even later, there was no swordsmanship in his list of martial arts. And there is only one reason for all this. Apart from Su Chen's most important talent, Jianxin, it is hard work. Constantly using a sword technique day and night. To think, to explore this sword technique, sword intent, and sword way. Looking at Su Chen, who seemed to be lost in thought, Chen Li smiled slightly. So, don't care what those birds say. Just do what you like. If you encounter any unjust things, just go to Lao Dao, that guy is a warm-hearted guy, you can also find me. What your grandma said is right, a person always needs a few friends. But if you make yourself unhappy and can't say it, you are not a friend. Quote. Su Chen pondered for a while, looked at Chen Li for a while, and then nodded. The words of the two were interrupted by a long howling sound. The footsteps stopped again immediately, and in the depths of this dense forest, a group of bandits had appeared again. And this long howl came from Lao Dao's mouth. Birds fly. The jungle is swaying. It seems that with this long howl, all the beasts in the forest have sensed the danger. It can be called two extremes with Chen Li. His swordsmanship is ghostly and invisible, vicious and vicious. It is hard to find traces. It seems to be surrounded by ghosts, hard to guard against. But at this time, the sword technique drawn by the old knife is completely opposite. Use a word that's used so badly online that it's hard for anyone to really feel it. It's called domineering leakage. The ordinary simple knife of the old knife in front of him is like this. In Chen Li's mind, this is the only word that can describe it. The point of the long knife is the domineering blade. As far as the blade reaches, is the way of the overlord. This is not an illusion, Lao Dao's sword technique is like this. In this life, Chen Li didn't give Lao Dao a chance to show off, but in the last life, this guy and himself showed off how many times. Under the Lingnan Song valve, the heavenly sword Song K. Although it is impossible for today's old knife to obtain the true biography of this existence, there are some knife skills treasured by the Song family, such as the knife skills left by Song K when he defeated others, there are many. And the sword technique used by Lao Dao now is from the tyrant sword, Yushan, who was defeated by Song K back then. It's like a dragon singing and a tiger roaring. It's like a mountain is collapsing. It's like a huge wave is lifting the sky. This knife is unrivaled. Unstoppable. Su Chen now suddenly discovered that the gap between people seems to be indeed greater than the gap between humans and dogs. He looked at the situation in front of him. The final boss of this green forest robber is 3 bosses above level 25. One is good at hidden weapons, one is good at swordsmanship, and the other is good at swordsmanship. The difficulty of this dungeon lies largely in the 3 masters. The main reason is that the 3 of them are attacking and defending together. The sword technique is good at attacking and killing, the sword technique is good at sneak attack from the side, and the concealed weapon is long-range attack. Those classmates he followed before in the so-called number 1 master of the Snow Mountain School. On that difficulty, under the cooperation of these 3 bosses, the gorgeous group was wiped out. Then, he was kicked out of the team. But this time, it was even more difficult than they played before. To put it bluntly, it was countless times harder. And this time, only the 2 people in front of them were the ones who really did it. Su Chen did make a move, but the damage caused in the end left him speechless. His swordsmanship is too low, his 5-dimensional attribute is average, and he has no combat experience. It is not a critical attack or a kill attack, so the damage is naturally insufficient. But as far as these 2 people's actions are concerned, under their joint efforts, these 3 bosses seem to be teased in the palm of their hands. You can't even use the slightest bit of strength to fight back. The gap between people is greater than the gap between humans and dogs. At this time, Su Chen really understood, perhaps in the eyes of Chen Li and Lao Dao, the level and strength of the so-called number 1 master of the Snow Mountain School. It was exactly the same as when he was in high school, when he saw those classmates who forgot to eat and sleep and only slept for 4 or 5 hours a day, but it was difficult to get more than 600 points in the exam. Thinking of this, Su Chen seemed to understand why Chen Li didn't care about the cynicism of those guys at all. Because it's unnecessary and not worth it. Thinking of this, a firm look flashed in Su Chen's eyes, and he made up his mind to become such a master himself. And as long as he is determined to do something, there are very few things that will not succeed. Except his dead grandma. Blades and blood. The footsteps coming and going, the sound of sharp blades piercing through the air and even sword energy piercing into the flesh. Competing with others, the feeling of dancing on the edge between swords and swords. Chen Li enjoys this feeling very much. In a sense, Zhonghu gave him the greatest pleasure. And the same is true for the old knife beside him. It's the first time I'm standing side by side with you, Chen and our cooperation is really tacit. How about we become black and white when we walk in the rivers and lakes in the future? Or swords and swords will do. Roll. Ignoring the nonsense of the old knife beside him, the cold light in Chen Li's eyes looked at the 3 bruised bosses in front of him. Okay, let's get it over with. There's no need to waste time. Lao Dao was a little bit discouraged. He finally came up with such a good-sounding nickname, but he didn't even have a chance to discuss it, so he was directly rejected. It's just that he was about to repeat Shu Shu's words again when he suddenly felt cold all over. Lao Dao's gaze suddenly shifted to Chen Li beside him. This icy coldness seemed to freeze people's souls. Subconsciously trembling. Even though this terrifying icy edge is not coming towards him, but this feeling is so eye-catching even if he just stands beside him, if he is really locked by his aura. Then what a horror it would be. Who are you? What kind of sword and saber technique is this? The leader of the family is holding a golden ringed sword, and the old sword is extremely envious. But at this moment, no one cares about him anymore. The eyes of the 3 were all on Chen Li at this moment. Chen Li is wearing a white robe, hunting. As if in the depths of this dense forest, cold winds blowing out from the 9 nether hells. This cold wind blows over his entire body, making him feel cold all over his body. An indescribable blackness froze on Chen Li's body, and there seemed to be ghostly shadows flickering on the clear Qingfeng sword. In an instant, the deepest part of this dense forest suddenly became audible. Not even a slightly louder breathing sound could be heard. It seemed that everyone was holding their breath, except for the rattling of dense forest leaves swaying in the wind at this time. There was nothing else. Chasing the soul. The must-kill sword art of evil-proof swordsmanship. This is the first time Chen Li actively uses it. He didn't know what kind of evil swordsmanship was in the hands of Lin Pingji and Yu Buchan, but at this moment, the evil swordsmanship activated by the true energy of Wanjian Guizong. At this time, under the influence of the sword intent, it seemed that he only had those 3 people not far away in his eyes. 3 enemies. Then, under the circumstances that most players would kneel when they saw these 3 at the current stage, they actually backed away. The 3 retreated together. This sword intent, this brewing sword force is really terrifying. However, the lore of this form of the evil sword art is called the soul-chasing style. What is soul-chasing? Chasing souls. Never die. That is a black light. A figure in a white robe and a bright and white long sword burst out with a black sword light at this moment. No one can describe how fast this sword is. If the previous one-word electric sword was an extremely bright flash of lightning, then this sword glow at this moment is a lore surprise attack that follows like a shadow. Except for Chen Li, I am afraid that no one can see this sword clearly. Even the 3 victims at this time. Chen Li's figure slowly stood still, and the Qingfeng sword was put back into its sheath by him. The sword edge mixed with blood was submerged into the scabbard, and there was a sharp grinding sound that made people's teeth ache. Almost at the same time, a faint red line suddenly appeared on the neck connecting the 3 great heads. The red line became bigger and bigger, and then, in the wide open eyes of the 3 people, there was a bang. A cloud of blood burst out, and their heads shot up into the sky instantly. In the deep and dense jungle, the smell of blood spread. The white clothes were still unstained at all, and there was a stark contrast to the scene where the blood was flowing like a river under his feet. Luoyang City is a big city in the world, and players' birthplaces are random, so there are naturally many players occupying Luoyang City. And this green forest robber is one of the very difficult dungeons around Luoyang City that players can touch at this stage. Therefore, many players will come and go here. Even like most of the other games, in front of the dungeon, there are many players who are doing bad business, selling some pills that restore blood and energy, so that those players who are fighting fiercely in this dungeon don't have to walk back and forth, save a lot of time. From this, it can be imagined that the situation in front of the dungeon is very lively. And now in front of the dungeon of the forest robbers, there is such another group of people who are particularly eye-catching. Wearing a robe of a disciple of the White Snow Mountain sect, and a long sword with a sheath that is also white, just standing in front of this dungeon. A streak of white light lit up from his side. This is the case of hanging up from the copy. The death in the dungeon will not appear at the resurrection point in the city. Correspondingly, the experience and cultivation realm lost by death and injury are relatively less than usual. The young man glanced at his teammates who also died, his face was a little gloomy. Hang up again. And the method of hanging is not the same as before. It fell into the hands of those 3 bosses again. Under this difficulty, the hidden weapon boss is too difficult to kill. Even if he claims to be a master, he seems a bit at a loss when faced with such a double team attack. And he, as the number 1 expert in their team, once he dies, one can imagine what will happen to the rest of them. After all, Zhonghu is not any other online game. The boss is a fixed program, what skills to use, and what skills to use when the amount of blood is reached. There is an unimaginable gap between martial arts masters and those outrageous bosses with high numbers. The difficulty is so high that it is beyond the imagination of other ordinary people. Brother fan, why don't you continue playing on common difficulty? The boss's attack speed and lightness skills on this difficulty are too fast. Not long after, white lights flickered one after another, and a team of 10 or so people gathered around this guy again. Compared with before, there is no doubt that the expressions on the faces of these men and women are not very good looking. Finally, someone said, "It's all due to that Su Chen, who was wiped out once in a difficult dungeon before, which caused a lot of martial arts realm. Otherwise, this boss should have been pinched." Yes. A big man, what is his name? Chen, he's so disgusting. Once people have a common enemy, they will form a word called the same enemy, and once they find a reason to get rid of their own problems, this is even more so. Shaking the pot is undoubtedly quite common. By the way, you said that Su Chen went to the hell level dungeon with those 2 sneaky guys, how is it now? What's the matter? You don't think they can pass the customs, do you? They probably hang up earlier than us, maybe they are already in Luoyang City. I really don't know how to live or die. The difficulty of this green forest robber is already so outrageous. Can players pass the level of this hell difficulty now? It's impossible. I don't think it's possible. I'm afraid that even if you call the Chen Li, there's no way to clear this dungeon. if you want to clear the level. A few people said something to each other, but it made the originally dull atmosphere a little more lively. It's just that the atmosphere has just eased up a little bit, and with a flash of light, it seems that everything has been sealed, and all the words that have not even been finished come to an abrupt end. Because in front of the gate of the dense forest path, a purple light flashed again, and 3 figures appeared. It was none other than the 3 people who just disappeared in front of the dungeon door and appeared in their mouths. Those 2 figures in bamboo hats are really eye-catching. It's just that it didn't turn into white light like them and hang out of the dungeon directly, but walked out slowly from the green forest path at the entrance of the dungeon. What this represents, everyone who is in front of the robbers in the green forest now knows it. Not to mention the purple light that represents the difficulty of hell. Pass. The noise in front of the entire dungeon door suddenly became audible. That Snow Mountain sect disciple and the people around him turned pale for a while. It was extremely ugly. All the previous words seemed to be slapped on their faces one by one. Chen Li didn't care, the old knife swept around, and the corner of his mouth was a little smug. He really wanted to show his holiness in front of this person, but Chen Li didn't have any interest. After experiencing the real big scene in the previous life, this scene is really nothing. The top of Mount Hua, the peak of martial arts, that is the real world bowing down. Don't look at it, keep going. Lao Dao shrugged, but to Chen Li's surprise, another figure stopped. Su Chen didn't move, but Uncommon said, "Brother Chen, I won't go." Chen Li was taken aback. Before he could ask, Su Chen continued. "I want to try it myself." Chen Li smiled, and then nodded. This place is indeed not the place where Su Chen should practice swords. He really shouldn't practice swords with himself and others now. Several people had already added friends in the dungeon, but now they simply left. Su Chen didn't even pay attention to the former teammates and classmates who stared at him with wide eyes, and walked towards the door of this copy. Just this road trip in the dense forest, the mentality has changed a lot. And on the road he is walking out now, there is no one else who can accompany him, only loneliness and loneliness. Chen Li looked at this still immature back and smacked his lips. He is indeed a person who can reach the top in his previous life. Gold will always shine. A rotten sentence, but still makes sense. Okay, don't waste time. From the beginning to the end, the 2 backs didn't look at the rest of the people at the gate of the dense forest, even the group of Snow Mountain School disciples who were quite involved before. 2 figures, one black and one white, one carrying a sword and one carrying a knife. The face under the bamboo hat has only scales and claws, no one knows the slightest bit. After a day, in an inn box in Luoyang City, Chen Li sat on the seat, looking at Lao Dao speechlessly. "Why did you order such a big table and ask me to pay?" Lao Dao clamped the rock sugar elbow on the chopsticks, narrowed his eyes slightly. "This river and lake is too real. The taste is soft, glutinous, salty, sweet and not greasy. It's better than what I eat in 5-star hotels, it's outrageous." He glanced at Chen Li who was too lazy to talk to him, and then said, "Good guy. Those messy martial arts cheats are all for you, why don't we have a meal?" Chen Li didn't bother to pay attention to him, and closed his eyes. But I have to say that what Lao Dao said is also reasonable. Except for the golden goose sword that broke out and gave Lao Dao the harvest of this dungeon, the rest of the martial arts cheats are all in Chen Li's backpack. Including the 2nd rank heroic swordsmanship book before, there are already 3 swordsmanship books. It's just that Chen Li is a little helpless. The other, Green Forest Swordsmanship, is nothing more than a low-level swordsmanship of the 2nd rank. But the book that broke out from the 2nd leader of the Green Forest robber was a 4th rank, Black Whirlwind Sword Art. Rank 4 Swordsmanship. It means that you can't enjoy the effectability of Sword Master in Wanjian Guizong so that the sword technique can be directly upgraded to the level of Zochin. You need to practice yourself, or spend precious potential points to improve. Nowadays, Chen Li's swordsmanship is not uncommon. In terms of quantity, there are a total of 11 swordsmanship. It has already met the requirements of Wanjian Guizong to be promoted again. But there are only 8 swordsmanship to achieve Zochin. The Songfang swordsmanship, as high as rank 6, exploded from Yu Kanghai's hands. And the 9th grade, evil resisting sword technique, that is mainly used today. Plus this black whirlwind swordsmanship. If you want to improve the realm of Wanjian Guizhong, you also need to raise 2 of these schools to the realm of Zhochen. But Chen Li is not in a hurry, his swordsmanship will always improve, and now his attention is completely on another matter. Such a frenzied way to clear the dungeon, and directly complete the number of dungeon challenges in such a short period of time, it is naturally impossible for Chen Li to get only these few martial arts cheats. The most critical thing is undoubtedly the improvement of the level realm. Level 25. In Zhonghu, in addition to equipment and martial arts bonuses, only 2 attribute points that can be allocated freely will be added every 5 levels. The attribute points for leveling up are limited, and even compared to the difficulty of obtaining them, it can be said that the benefits are extremely low. On the contrary, the improvement of martial arts and weapons is extremely high, which is why every time there is a magical weapon in the world, there will be a bloodbath. But no matter what, the promotion to level 25, plus the attribute points that Chen Li hadn't used when he broke through level 15, is enough to meet the learning requirements of the lightness skill, 7-star steps. A ray of white light slowly merged into Chen Li's body. Lao Dao glanced at it curiously and then ignored it, continuing to concentrate on dealing with the crystal elbow in front of him. Countless information poured into Chen Li's mind. What a character Sikong is. Some people may think that those who are at the bottom of the ranking list and whose ranking is not high have only that strength. But in fact, there are no mediocre people on the 3 lists of heaven, earth and people. Although the earth rankings are not as good as the heaven rankings, but the masters who are superior in nature, at this stage, when the masters of the heaven rankings are high and the dragons see their heads but not their tails, they are almost the top power in the world. And being able to be on the list in this ranks, it all represents what kind of strength it has reached. But Sikong's other martial arts are not worth mentioning. Just relying on his disguise technique, skillful hand and empty hand, and the most important lightness skill to be on the list, it is enough to show that his lightness skill is unique in the world. Although this 7-star step is not the step that Sikong relies on to reach the stars, it is obvious that the things that this being known as the King of Stealing Kings will definitely not be bad. 7-star steps 6th grade lightness Kung Fu. The first weight 0.6 thousandths. Footwork like light skills, which can move and dodge at high speed, the secret method of Sikong's early youth skills. At the same time, it is also the basic lightness exercise of Sikong's unique lightness exercise, star-touching steps. Close black lens bracket. Flat speed plus 25%, 75%. Flexible dodge plus 5%. Jump and move plus 60%. Perception effect plus 20%. Close black lens bracket. Tianshu. Consume internal energy to quickly advance a certain distance. Speed and distance depend on how much internal energy is consumed. Close black lens bracket. Lightness Kung Fu does not have the effect of reducing the consumption of potential points by swordsmanship. Even if it is only the first 7-star step, the potential points consumed have reached the point where ordinary players are speechless. The most important thing is that after comprehending the 7-star step, Chen Li can clearly sense that with the inn and restaurant as the center, it is like a spider web, and the range of his sensing has suddenly expanded. At the wine table downstairs, a few Zhonghu people were drinking and bragging. The sound of Xiao Er's busy and fast footsteps, the sound of the shopkeeper behind the counter fiddling with his abacus. The sound of the back kitchen killing chickens and sheep. There was even the faint cry and struggle of the woman upstairs. Everything is extremely clear. As long as Chen Li thinks about it, he can explore it clearly. Etc. Chen Li was taken aback suddenly, crying and struggling. Is she still a woman? There was a cold light in Chen Li's eyes. Immediately opened his eyes, Chen Li got up immediately, looked at the old knife who was still gnawing on half of the crystal elbow, and directly dragged this guy out of the private room door. Non beat it. The greasy old knife spoke inarticulately. Chen Li didn't explain, and led the guy to a door in the upstairs guest room, and kicked it open. In the arena, many people are often involuntary. People are in the rivers and lakes, can't help themselves, this Chen Li can also understand. But there is one thing that Chen Li hates the most, and it is absolutely unforgivable. That is these flower pickers. It can be said that it is not an exaggeration to kill 100 times. If he really has the ability to keep the girl's heart, then that's all. This kind of thing that only wants to be comfortable for 3 seconds, and makes the girl jump into the well to commit suicide, can't be killed 1,000 times. Especially in the era background of Zhonghu, chastity can be said to be the most important thing for a woman. Brothels are also a legitimate business, so going out to Huo Qingbai's house isn't it purely against people. Who dares to disturb Grandpa's fun? Believe it or not, Grandpa cut that thing off with one knife. In the room, there was a bang. There is an indescribable stamina in this voice, and it can be heard from just this burst of shouting. The person in this room must be a master with good internal strength. And the strength is definitely not weak. Chen Li's expression didn't fluctuate at all. Lao Dao quickly threw the crystal elbow aside, wiped his robe with his oily hands, and put his hand on the handle of the knife. At the same time, the owner of this voice finally caught Chen Li's eyes. Wearing a cyan robe, wearing a yellow loon scarf. His cheeks were thin and narrow, and his arms were also long and narrow, but now his blue robe was a little messy, and he had a long knife that he had just picked up in his hand. Chen Li was slightly taken aback when he saw this person, because there was a rather familiar name on the head of the person in front of him. Tian Bogong, level 40. If we say that the most famous villain among martial arts, then this person is ranked second, absolutely no one can rank first. It's not martial arts, but the popularity is really high. But no matter what, this is a flower picker. This is the truth. If it's another plot character, he might not do anything, even if he can be inserted into the main task, then he can still benefit from it. But this guy in front of him, no. It wasn't because this guy was forced to put down the butcher's knife in the original book that he could really become a Buddha right away. It's not someone who lightly joins Buddhism and can redeem the sins of the first half of his life. There is no such reason in the world. Right now, even more so. Chen Li looked at the bed in the guest room. There was a woman with disheveled clothes and tightly tied clothes. Grandma, who is not afraid of death, dared to mess up Grandpa's good things. I really don't know whether to live or die. Tian Bogong had a fierce look on his face, a notorious flower picker. If Chen Li hadn't met it would be fine, but since he met him today, there is really nothing to say. Lao Dao didn't even need to make eye contact with him, he was even better than Chen Li for the matter in front of him. Although I have never married a wife in this life, the most annoying thing in my life is hanging people like you. Clang. The sound of the 3 weapons being unsheathed sounded almost simultaneously. The originally noisy inn and restaurant were suddenly attracted by this sound. Holding a knife and holding a sword, places like inns and restaurants are undoubtedly not a rare thing. Tian Bogong's strength is no weaker than Yu Kanghai's. Even in a certain situation, even better. Because Tian Bogong's main strength, besides this sharp knife, is his lightness kung fu and body skills. As soon as the expert makes a move, he will know if there is one. The moment Chen Li drew out his sword, Tian Bogong was shocked by the sharpness of his sword. This sword technique, even if he fights alone and goes all out, Tian Bogong is not sure, at most it is only 5 or 5. But there is an old knife holding a golden goose knife beside him. The momentum on his body is strong, not much weaker. Ruthless roll. Tian Bogong secretly thought in his heart, but he is not slow at all with a single knife in his hand. Wind sword technique, flying sand and rolling stones. It seems to sound similar to Washan sword sect's Kuifeng Kuaijian. In fact, it is indeed similar. The Kuangfeng Kuaijian is a Kuaijian, and the Kuangfeng sword technique is a Kuaijian. Even if it is used on this restaurant, it is still full of strong winds, the tables and chairs blown by it burst, and the dishes burst. But since Chen Li used his sword, there is no possibility of missing it. In this narrow place, what a wealth of experience he has. He first blocked Tian Bogong's way, and then let Lao Dao block the only window where he could escape except the main entrance. Quick knife, the biggest reliance is speed. And Tian Bogong's advantage is largely based on the lightness kung fu that travels alone for thousands of miles. It's a pity that in this room that blocked the way, it was like cutting off Tian Bogong's hands and feet. Why are you doing this? Is there any misunderstanding with my brother? Why don't we talk about it? Seeing this scene, Tian Bogong narrowed his eyes slightly, as if opening his mouth to share his attention, but with his eyes rolling wildly, he was already looking at the surrounding area, thinking about how to get out. However, he didn't finish his sentence. Jianying has already rushed directly. When the long knife and the Qingfeng sword were handed over, a dazzling spark flew out. How fast was Tian Bogong's reaction? Just relying on this moment of parrying, his figure is like a loach and goes directly behind Chen Li. If it had been before, it might have been directly won by this fellow. But now Chen Li is very different. Although the 7-star step that he has just obtained is just a beginner's practice, but as Sikong's special skill for picking up stars, the effect of this 7-star step is really not comparable to that of ordinary light work. It's just that Chen Li didn't even chase after him in a hurry, watching Tian Bogong directly pass him and rush out of the door. HMPH, if you want to kill Grandpa, it's still too early for you. A triumphant voice sounded in front of him. Tian Bogong sneered, but he didn't look back. He directly used his lightness kung fu, and was about to fly under the restaurant. It's just that his voice hasn't even fallen yet. Words are not finished. At this moment, Chen Li, who was still at the door just now, appeared behind him at some point. And that ghostly long sword has already entered Tian Bogong's back heart. -17,845. -15,871. ... The number of blood red is floating, and Tian Bogong did not die immediately. This main supporting role, who should have been extremely important in the plot of Xiaoao, has not yet officially appeared on the Zhonghu, so in such a useless way, died in this seemingly nameless restaurant. The man turned his head in disbelief, looked at the long sword inserted into the back of his heart, and finally could only spit out a few words in horror. How? So fast? System announcement. Player, Chen Li, and Lao Dao, beheaded the only level NPC, Tian Bogong. Zhonghu Prestige +3. The plot of Swordsman has been greatly changed. Close black lens bracket. Thanks for watching, subscribe and support my channel.